Welcome to AM Best Audio.
The new J.D. Power 2025 Independent Agent Satisfaction Study spotlights a gap between carriers' offerings and what independent agents say they need to thrive, especially regarding communication, risk appetite clarity, and feeling valued. I'm John Weber for AM Best Audio, and I'm speaking today to Craig Martin, Executive Director, Global Insurance Intelligence at J.D. Power. Craig, so glad you could join us today.
Thanks so much for having me. I look forward to speak with you.
I'm looking forward as well. So, Craig, what surprised you the most in this year's study, especially compared to previous years, about how agents feel undeserved?
I think what was a little bit surprising is coming out of a hard market, we're seeing rates improve, particularly in the auto space on the personal side, but yet there's still a very large number of agents who say, they're really not getting what they need from their carrier partner. So whether it's getting enough clients approved, but even really not understanding whether it's compensation or risk appetite. It's kind of shocking. Those really core foundational needs of a relationship are being missed. A very large number. We saw almost over 40%, both in personal and commercial, saying that those core foundational needs aren't being delivered on. So that was a little bit shocking for us. That even today we're seeing those struggles.
Now, the data shows that agents who feel undervalued are significantly more likely to reduce business with certain insurers. What steps can carriers take to strengthen their relationships with agents?
Yeah, I think it starts with the basics. This is a business. People understand it's a business. They understand that, insurers have to be writing good business. But the key challenge that you see oftentimes is that it's that core communication. It's making sure you're clearly communicating to the agent, what kind of business are we looking for? What's the appetite that you have? And then also having some level of flexibility. We heard this over and over again in the data and also in some live interviews that we did that, there's this feeling that there's no flexibility. It's either black and white. There's kind of a reduction in willingness to work with an agent. If I've got great clients, everyone wants those clients and I can, take them to multiple carriers, but it's, I grow my business and my success comes from making things work for people that maybe aren't perfect. And so that idea of, not just communicating what's available, but also taking into account kind of the situations and being a little bit flexible is a real key piece of what you can do. And it's also even just the basics of compensation communication. It's, a lot of the comp plans are similar and they're not looking for kind of a handout, but making sure you're clear of, like what's important, what do you need to do to get paid and why? And, again, I think as you change things, you have to be proactive and repeat it. It's not just a one and done thing. I think too often people think, oh, well, we let them know, we sent an email. Well, that's not probably good enough in a lot of cases to really communicate. It's lots of channels, lots of methods, lots of repetition because people are busy. They get distracted. They lose sight of something. So if you made a change in your risk standards or your comp plan, you got to repeat that and make sure people are aware. It's not just a here it is and we're done, but it's really making sure that that communication approach is kind of clear, concise, repeated, and across multiple channels.
Craig, ease of doing business emerged as a strong differentiator in agent satisfaction. What operational changes do you think will move the needle most for insurers?
So I think there's a couple of things. One is, access to support. And there's kind of two parts to that. One is the technology. So, obviously if you can make it easy, fast through self-service channels and again, depending on the carrier, we hear that a lot of folks, they like self-service. They want to be able to, go through the quoting process and again, without having a lot of effort and energy that they put in. They're busy folks. Their job as agents is to get out and get in front of clients, get and identify the needs. So once they get into the quoting process, the faster and easier, we hear things like, how much manual effort and entry is required to submit information. How much kind of back and forth is necessary. So on the technical side, knocking down those things, whether it's, pre-filling information or making it really easy to submit information is key. On the other side, there is a support angle, which is making it easy. Is if I have a group that is supporting me on a more consistent basis, I know what to expect. We have a good rapport. I know how to get to that, support group, and making sure that, you can establish those relationships. So when they need help from a human rather than that self-service angle, it's easy to get to that person. Also, there's a rapport and a level of communication that's going on there. So I think, again, part of it is that there's not a one size fits all, and there's going to be situations where maybe a self-service channel is not going to work. I want to make it easy when I have to change channels. If I have to go to a group and call the call center or another support group, it's easy to get to them. So I think that's the dynamic, is all those channels being seamless and kind of interactive. So when it doesn't work out perfectly on the technology side, it doesn't take a major effort. I can get to someone to get me help quickly and easily.
Customize your data experience. BestLink now offers an interactive company dashboard that provides company-level intelligence in a fast, user-friendly interface featuring interactive tables, charts, and Sparkline performance histories. Customize the dashboard tiles to prioritize the insurer ratings, data, and analytics that best support your workflow. AM Best. Our insight, your advantage.
Now, considering agents report insufficient clarity around risk appetite and client qualification, how can insurers better signal those boundaries without constraining flexibility?
Great question. I think part of it is just repetition and simplifying the message. Too often I think that there's an assumption that we've told them once, and therefore they're going to understand and recognize where we're at in terms of risk appetite. So part of it is just making sure that you're frequently going out and messaging what's important, what are the key drivers. I think it behooves both sides. I want to know what you're writing. I know what your appetite is and what you're focused on. And the carriers that we see get really high marks tend to do a good job of that. If there's a feeling that I know what's coming, I know what they want, and I can go out and target that. No one wants to be submitting a bunch of business that gets turned down. So I think on that side, it's really important just to that kind of repetition and clarity. But it's also, again, what are you willing to do? And again, I think to your point, you want flexibility. What are the bounds? So that people can, again, you want that transparency about what are we really willing to do and why. I think too often that there's a sense of, hey, we're a little afraid that if we communicate price differences or changes or some other impact, that we're not going to get the business. And while price is absolutely core, I mean, if you're not competitive on price, that's a real problem. You can't get the business. But if you're in the market and it's close and you've got other differentiating factors, you want to really play that up. So again, I think it's so critical, not to assume people know or understand, but even if nothing's changed, reinforce that. Make sure that point is very clear to your partners, because, again, in the absence of information, people formulate their own opinions, and they're going to see what's coming, and they're going to make decisions based on that, regardless of you say it or not.
Looking ahead, Craig, how might these findings influence how carriers and agents co-design solutions or partnerships in a shifting market environment?
I think there's a couple of things. One is there's an opportunity for folks to better align. And again, not every carrier is going to want to write certain pieces of business. Not every agent's going to want to do that business. And I think sometimes what happens is, in the effort of having more folks appointed and having more agents out there, you're stretching resources too thin. And really, again, understanding what the dynamics are. I think, again, the fact that we have such a high percentage of agents not feeling valued by the carriers that they're working with, and essentially, I read some of the verbatim comments, and it said, oh, they're my carrier of last resort. I will do something if I have to with them, but I don't want to. Those aren't productive relationships. So I think there's some level of how do we optimize where the relationships are going. And again, that's a co-creation of, it's not a bad thing for us to not work together, understanding what's important to you so we can both be successful in the business, and also getting to a place where, what are our priorities, and not being afraid to communicate that. we listened to some of our qualitative interviews, and a lot of the changes in the way things are being done are being sent out in emails to agents who they've worked with for a long time. And, that's a really negative feeling from an agent's perspective of, I've worked with you and we've had a long-term relationship. You're changing how you do business, but you don't take the time to actually speak to me about that. You send me an email that I may or may not see. So I think there's a really, again, that mutual respect, even if the relationship right now doesn't work based on, again, the underwriting standards or other factors, having that respect is, I think, a key word, respecting their position on both sides, and then really having a good job of communicating what and why, you can go a long way, because we don't have to do business today, but what about in the future when the market changes, situations change, focus changes? It's important to be able to respect each other. And so I think that communication goes a long way of building good product, good service, and good quality relationships.
Craig, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
That was Craig Martin, Executive Director, Global Insurance Intelligence at J.D. Power. And I'm John Weber for AM Best Audio. Looking to get the full attention of the insurance industry? We have the platforms that will do just that. Whether it be AM Best TV, AM Best Audio, Best Review Magazine, or Best Day. Find out more by calling AM Best Advertising Sales at 908-439-2200, extension 5399, and have a great day.